What was Balaam's first prophecy? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Numbers on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Numbers chapter 23. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 12. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Numbers chapter 23, beginning at verse 1. Then Balaam said to Balak, "Build 7 altars for me here, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams." And Balak did just as Balaam had spoken. And Balak and Balaam offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Then Balaam said to Balak, "Stand by your burnt offering, and I will go. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he shows me I will tell you." So he went to a desolate height. And God met Balaam, and he said to him, "I have prepared the 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram." Then the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, "Return to Balak, and thus you shall speak." So he returned to him, and there he was, standing by his burnt offering, he and all the princes of Moab. And he took up his oracle and said, "Balak, the king of Moab, has brought me from Aram, from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me, and come, denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how shall I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. There, a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number 1/4 of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his." Then Balak said to Balaam, "What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, and look, you have blessed them bountifully." So he answered and said, "Must I not heed to speak what the Lord has put in my mouth?" Balaam has now arrived in Moab and is meeting Balak. Now the trip from where Balaam lived was eventful, for he was almost killed by the angel of the Lord due to the fact that the Lord was angry that Balaam seemed so eager to go. However, Balaam's donkey, who saw the angel of the Lord when Balaam did not, saved him from being killed. The Lord relented and told Balaam that he could go, but again, he would only be allowed to speak what the Lord told him to. Now Balak, king of Moab, had called Balaam to him in order that he would curse Israel, thus allowing Balak and his army to defeat Israel. Coming to chapter 23, Balaam has Balak build 7 altars and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams. Remember, anyone who is not under the covenant that God made with Israel could offer their own sacrifices to God. Only Israel was restricted to using the priests of the house of Aaron. That is an important point to understand due to the fact that people want Christians to follow at least parts of the law of Moses today. That law was only for Israel. Why did Balaam have Balak build 7 altars? Although the text doesn't specifically say, the number 7 in scriptures is seen as representing completeness. So if that's the case, Balaam would be desiring to offer a complete service to God. Once the altars were set up and the animals prepared, Balak was to stand with the burnt offerings while Balaam would go and talk to the Lord, if the Lord willed, that is, and then the Lord would show Balaam what would be revealed to Balak. When Balaam had gone to a desolate height, or a bare place on a hill, God met Balaam there, and Balaam told God that the 7 altars had been made, and 7 bulls and rams had been offered, 1 on each altar. The Lord told Balaam that when he returned to Balak, that the Lord would put the words in his mouth, and those would be the words that he would speak. This shows us that Balaam was inspired. That is how Balaam was unable to curse Israel here. Not only did Balaam not desire to speak against the word of the Lord, but the Lord seemed to make it impossible for Balaam to do so here. For God was not going to allow Balak to think that he had abandoned Israel. The oracle or prophecy verse began by stating that it was Balak who called him from Aram, meaning the region we know as Syria today, to curse and denounce the people of Israel. But that wouldn't happen, for how could Balaam curse those whom God had not cursed? And how could Balaam denounce a people whom God did not denounce? Balaam said that he had observed Israel from the tops of the rocks and hills, and behold, it was a people you could not count, for who could number 1/4 of them? This statement here shows us that some modern Bible scholars who seek to vastly lower the amount of people in Israel who entered the Promised Land are simply wrong. Israel was as large as the Bible says, and we'll see just how large this second generation is, Lord willing, in chapter 26. Moreover, Israel would be a people who would dwell alone and not reckon itself among the other nations, meaning that they would take the Promised Land. Balaam closes by saying that he hoped that he would die the death of the righteous. In other words, those people who had come before who placed their faith in God, and that his end be like this, meaning that he be remembered for living such a life. And after Balaam's death, he will be remembered, even in the New Testament, but not in a good way like Abraham was, but for the evil that he brought upon Israel later. Now, understandably, Balak was angry with this because not only had Balaam not cursed Israel, he had blessed them. Balaam answered, though, that he had to heed what the word of the Lord had spoken. We'll see Balaam's second prophecy, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Numbers chapter 23, verses 13 to 30, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.